what I'm going to be doing now is giving you an overview to something, and there'll be a link down below to listen to the full 4-hour podcast, right? There's a reason, folks, why I no longer felt safe and secure living unarmed in rural Southwest Colorado. And there was retaliation placed against me by more than a few people. But one of those individuals retaliated because I covered the corruption in Costilla County, Colorado in 2015 when they were kicking people off their land that didn't have a septic system. And I'm telling you, I know there's a lot of people out there that think that everybody has to follow the law to the T. But if you look at the homelessness epidemic, if you look at the high cost of rent, if you look at the violence in the cities, if you look at what's happening geopolitically with China and Russia, there might be a war kicking off soon with Iran, right? If you look at it from that perspective, then you'll understand why I was so passionate for so long, not only about living off grid for myself, but standing up for others with my given birth name that were being kicked off their land. And the truth is, the people that I helped are not my friends today. There's a lot of people that used me back in the day. I talk in my podcast link down below about what drew me to Costilla County the first time in 2013 when I was living in the yurt, how I ended up back in Portland, Oregon, homeless. And even though I was back on the air in cable access TV, nobody would help me. They just assumed that I deserved it. And I encountered some pretty strange folks then. But I felt a spiritual calling to go back to Costilla County. And it seems that I was there at the right time, right? At the right place at the right time. I feel like it was almost divine for me to have met the people that I met. And there was a kinship for a while, for a few days, but there was interference. Now, I don't know if the individuals that came down to interfere with our movement were agent provocateurs, or if they were being led by agent provocateurs that were hiding behind the scenes, manipulating them, or if they were just following sovereign citizen ideology. But there were folks that came down that infiltrated the off-grid movement. And even though that I said, right, that these people may be government agents, the people did not believe me. And many off-gridders supported those individuals and went on to promote far-right ideology. This was also a time in which fake news was all over Facebook that was targeting 3 specific states. For those that don't know, Colorado was one, Virginia was another, Florida was another. So even though there were a lot of immigrants that Obama may have brought over, right? They weren't all terrorists, and they were all being portrayed as terrorists. So because of the things that I've dealt with in my own life, I knew that this demographic of humans were not my friend. I'm not partisan. I'm not for Trump. I'm not for Biden. I'm not for Obama. I'm not for Bush. I have been exposing the military-industrial complex and the New World Order and the surveillance society and so many other things, right? This never-ending debt, right? On purpose. It's a debt on purpose, right? But I stood against those paradigms. Others did not. Others got into QAnon. Others got into the dark side of conspiracy theory, of which I talk a great deal about. And because I left Costilla County, because of that infiltration, I went to other places in which I faced serious bad luck. And then from that experience, I ended up living off the grid in Southwest Colorado, when in reality, the vast majority of my neighbors were into far-right ideology. And to them, I was just another other. My documentary about China meant nothing to them. My information on the solar flares meant nothing to them. In fact, it made some people that were promoting other views of the sun, i.e. the sun is dying, things of that nature. It just made people angry that I had a different opinion. And so certain things happened to me that were negative when I lived off the grid. There was interference from multiple individuals, not just one, right? Definitely over 4 or 5. And so that motivated me to move on from that experience. And it has been a loss. Even though the land has doubled in value in Colorado, so that land is now double what it was worth. At the moment in which I sold it, it was sold at a loss. I left the RV up there, which broke down. I left the $4,000 shed up there and lots of prepper stuff. You know, I jokingly talk about prepper PTSD. I'm not talking about a real condition, but like, you know, put yourself in a situation where you've prepped 3 times in your life with food and water, and you've had to move your stuff, or you had to move your body away from your stuff. You couldn't take your stuff with you because all you could do is leave with a backpack and travel around. And so I faced some major difficulty, folks, in the years in which I was not online. And I don't talk about that, the post-2020 reality, as much in the podcast, but when American cities were burning, And during the period of January 6th, where we saw the right-wing uprising, so we saw a controlled left-wing uprising and a controlled right-wing uprising, right? And don't you forget it, as they play both sides off against each other, as those at the top of the pyramid rule it all, the hidden hand. I recorded something called the Great Correction Series, a 31-part series in which I countered the disinformation on the controlled left and right. And I knew to not upload it in 2020, in 2021, but I am uploading it now. And anyone that wants to contact me and say that they repent and disavow of all forms of racism, not just anti-white racism, but all forms of racism, then they're welcome to listen to what I said. But I'm not just going to put it out there. But here's what I want to say, and then you can listen to the podcast. The so-called liberty movement, freedom movement, dropped the ball on Costilla County. They were too focused on like the wildlife refuge. And in the podcast, I talk about my narration of Burns, Oregon, how I felt that it was a honeypot to attract individuals that would later end up on the government radar. And so the liberty movement could have actually focused on Costilla County, and there could have been resolution. There could have been legal support. There could have been an upgrade to the land use code to allow compost toilets, but there hasn't been. And so the future of off-grid living, that's the point now, where we are now in 2023. Where are we now, Alex? Where are we now? It's way too expensive in some of these areas, be it Southwest Colorado, be it the northern parts of Colorado, or South Central Colorado. It's way too expensive for a lot of people to get a good piece of land right now, right? Because a lot of people during COVID-19, right, even though it was called the lockdown, as far as I understand, we weren't forced to remain in our homes. Criminals were allowed to run around and steal catalytic converters and do shit like that, right? And in many cases, nobody was stopping them. So people think it's just an issue not of police. No, they created the circumstance during the lockdowns in which it was criminals gone wild all across America. I still remember what it was like tossing and turning, hearing the sound of gunshots in 2021 and 2022. Fortunately, that's died down, but we're not out of the woods yet. What do you think is going to happen when the shit hits the fan and they don't get their food and they don't get their water and they don't get their whatever assistance that they're getting from the system? It's not going to be a pretty situation. And so for those of us in these grid environments, right, the future looks dangerous. But I know in my heart that I did what was right, and I put others in some cases before myself. I sacrificed for others. I'm not going to cry you a long river about how these others that I, put before myself aren't my friends now, but I knew that it was not out of self-motivation for clicks and hits to do what I did. I believed in what I was doing, and I still believe in what I'm saying. The reason those videos regarding Costilla County aren't on the internet is because I was the point man for bringing this story to the world, in which many people in the alternative media copy-pasted my videos and content and shared it on their page. But did they come to our aid? Did it result in positive things happening? Or did it just make locals angry in Colorado that hated off-gridders, that have an attitude that somebody shouldn't be allowed to live off-grid? I think that thinking is unconscious, and it's callous, and it's cruel. Because I'll tell you, the next wave is coming. The next wave is coming from the West Coast. It's coming from the East Coast. And people are going to be rushing one day when they declare World War III. And they're going to be out there looking for a nice off-grid piece of property when it's too late. Some of them already bought their property and they think they're going to get on the freeway and that the freeways are going to be clear and they're just going to be able to get to their off-grid retreat when this shit hits the fan. I don't think so. I think that if we face major attacks from Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, who knows who else, right? That many Americans, including myself, are going to be trapped exactly where we are. So this is why I talk about spirituality. This is why I talk about preparing for the hereafter from a non-radical perspective, like some people, right? But I'm talking about truly preparing for the hereafter with good deeds, with promoting peace and love, right? I have been contacted by the women of this world that said, thank you, Alex, for warning about the human trafficking epidemic that's already here and will be coming. I have been contacted by people that said, Alex, because of the things that you've said, you've helped bring me out of white supremacy, black supremacy, Islamic radicalism, racism, or New Age bullshit, right? Haven't heard from those people, but I want to. I want to believe one day that my words, my powerful words, will reach people and they will heal people. But a lot of people judge me as something that I'm not. because they just looked at the surface. They just looked at the mistakes that I made when I was a young man, when I put a poison in my body as a result of being traumatized from child abuse and child neglect. Right? I can't go back and change those days of the late 90s. But I've always been a soul that wanted to help others. I wasn't a juvenile delinquent as a child, right? I wasn't a bad person in my youth. I just was suffering. And so because of that, people viewed me and the fact that I was homeless and in ARV as an undesirable. And the fact of the matter is, one day, everybody may be in the same level of poverty when the dollar collapses, when the banks go down, when there's an EMP. And hopefully you're preparing now in mind, body, and spirit so that when that day comes, you're more capable of dealing with that which we have to deal with. But the ultimate truth is, if we don't prepare spiritually in our heart, if we don't repent before Jesus or whatever your religion happens to be, right? Because I think there's many bad Muslims. I will recommend once in a while a Sufi out of LA that talks about the unseen forces, what the Christians call demons, what I call the archons, what he calls the jinn, right? But I don't promote religion in general. But there is a reason why there are many Christians that watch my content, that have supported me over the years. Even if they may not have been there for me in recent years and didn't know what I was going through and why I wasn't continuing to upload videos, right? There have been good people in my life that in some cases may have been sent by God. And so this is a time, folks, to pray for a miracle, not only in our lives, but in our world. Because my heart breaks for this world, because there's a lot of people that don't know what's coming and they're going to be suffering. And so for a lot of people that don't understand me and don't understand why I cared about off-gridders, it's because of the things that are coming to this country. And one day when these things do come to our country, they will know why. They will know why I cared about off-grid rights. They will know why when these events come to pass. So follow the link down below. You can hear my 3-hour, 4-hour talk. And then after that discussion, you're going to hear from a man named Kyle who talked with a woman named Maggie. And they have some special insight that you need to hear as well about the interference that came our way, that completely interfered with and sabotaged the off-grid movement that I and others try to kick off, the off-grid freedom movement. I'm Alex Ansary signing off for October 27th, 2023. Again, follow the link down below for a 4-hour podcast expanding on my experience.